Hi, I'm Sarah and welcome to CoreMoodz, and today I'll be talking to you about every book I read this spring. I read a lot of very interesting books. I was surprised, I was disgusted, and I was overall very happy with everything I read this spring. The first book that I finished is the second book in the Gunmetal Gods series by Zamil Akhtar, Conqueror's Blood. I really liked this entire book series so far, and the second book was so different than the first one. In the first one, you have different sides fighting and arguing and philosophizing and presenting to us why they are the right side in this epic medieval crusades dark fantasy. There are cosmic elements. There's a lot of talk about faith and justice and what does justice mean. And I like that it's not just the Western perspective. There's a Persian Shah at the center. There's a mystic. So it's a very interesting, and I really love the first book. And in the second book, it completely diverse my expectations because the perspectives are different. The story is completely focused on the stuff that I didn't even register in the first book. So I'm very interested in continuing, and I'm currently reading the third book, Elder Epoch. I also read the novella, Death Rider. Death Rider is a novella in this series, and it's meant to be read, I think, after the second book. It was a very unique, dark story. It's been a while since I read fantasy that got this dark, but I really liked the concept, and I really was fascinated. And I can't say much because it's the second book and a 2.5 book, and I'm now reading the third book. So if you are interested, please pick them up, because I feel like when the first book was coming out, a lot of people were talking about it. And then every year with the release of the second, third, fourth book, I feel like the little hype that this indie release had has died down. Each book that I have read so far has been well written. I can imagine the world. I'm surprised, I'm shocked, but it's dark. So I can understand people not being incentivized to pick it up, but I loved it. So next I read Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, and I made a video about discussing the book versus the movie. And while I really enjoyed the book at the time, the author has made comments about his books being apolitical and that he doesn't think about the world or politics, and that doesn't factor in because to him it's a completely different world. I feel a little bit iffy about that, so I just don't know if this is an author that I'm continuing to read from, but I enjoyed this book. After that, I read The Changeling by Victor Lavalle, and I am obsessed with this author. I read The Devil in Silver. I read The Ballad of Black Tom, and both stories were really interesting and very strong in concepts, strong when it comes to the writing. This author knows who he is and what he's writing about, and he does it in a very creative way. So I was really interested in picking up The Changeling, and the title says kind of what it's about, the concept of the changeling. The story is about the couple, so you kind of can deduce where the story at least starts. The journey this author takes us on. I'm now at the last 2 episodes of the TV show, because there was a TV show. I want to just do a little bit of a deep dive and just discuss the themes and the elements that I picked up on, because I have a little bit of a controversial take. And I'm just gonna leave that for the video. The next book I read is Perfect Victums by Mohammed Kurd, and this book was so heartbreaking. I was so interested and I felt so connected to the way this author was portraying his perception on how the West views the conflicts that are close to him, and the pain and suffering that he has witnessed, that the people, his family, his friends, people he knows, people he's engaging with, a whole society, a whole community. There's an entire genocide going on. So I just feel like there needs to be more eyes and more ears opened to voices from places where this kind of bad things are happening. The next book I read was Vigil by Saunders. The story was about, there's a man, he's on his deathbed, and he is some kind of tycoon, some kind of, he does stuff, I think oil. Imagine the pain and suffering that an oil tycoon has caused on earth, what kind of damage his company has caused, and what kind of feelings people have about him, and how this book focuses on he's on his deathbed, and then there's this death angel, death guidance person that goes to him and is supposed to help him transition into the afterlife. And we watch a list of people come to say their last word to him before he is gone, and how he is explaining and internalizing and also reflecting back on what kind of life he has and what are his opinions. And I thought it was very interesting because I feel like some parts got very satirical and some parts were just absurd. So I was entertained, but I'm not sure this author is for me. I thought this book was okay. After that, I read A Mouthful of Salt by Reem, Gaafar, and I loved this. This book was so raw, and it gave me a look into life in Sudan, specifically for people in the South, and the levels of racism, the levels of colorism, and also things like xenophobia. And it's so interesting how this book managed to remain very intimate and also very connected to the characters, even though it hopped around and told multiple people's stories. It starts with the river. the River Nile, the people that live by the river, their connection to the river. And there's like this speculative element, and the book ties in the end, and there is this big reveal and this huge traumatic escalation of events. To me, this book focuses on the pain and suffering of women, the role of women, the length that other women can go through to justify patriarchy, the way misogyny is internalized, and also misogyny in a culture, and how people behave, and are women safe, and when are women safe, what kind of conditions are needed for a woman to be safe. I love this book. I think this is a book that I'm probably going to reread, and there are elements. The writing was beautiful. The subject matter was very intense. I'm definitely going to read more from the author. After that, I read Dear Senthuran, a Black Spirit memoir by Akwaeke Emezi, and I love Akwaeke Emezi. Akwaeke Emezi, I think I've read almost everything by them. There are 2 or 3 books of them that I have not read yet, but I have all of them, and I might make it a project just to do a deep dive on all of their works and what I think of them. I love the creativity of this author. The writing is beautiful. The topics are interesting, and I'm just amazed. Dear Senthuran, it's a kind of a memoir, and it's focused on Akwaeke Emezi, their life, where they were before they published their books, what was going on while they were publishing their books, especially Freshwater, because it had such a big reception. The reaction of the people when they were doing their MFA, I think, the reaction of their peers, of their teachers, how they started their journey as an author, how the years after that looked like, why they were inspired to write certain books, and when they wrote them, what kind of mindset they were in. I think I love this book, and I think more authors should write this kind of books, because I love this kind of analysis and reflection. After that, I read If an Egyptian Cannot Speak English by Noor Naga. And this book was very interesting. It's set in Egypt, set in an Egypt that is falling apart after the Arab Spring. And there's an American Egyptian young girl grappling with her identity, that she wants to be unique. She wants to be an individual. She wants to make her own choices, and she wants to distance herself from the collective way of thinking that religiously, and also when it comes to culture, her parents want her, the standards that they want her to fit. So she shaves her head, she goes to Cairo, and she just starts living there and trying to learn Arabic, trying to be an Egyptian person. What does that look like? This book is about, is she Egyptian? How does it look like to be Egyptian? What are her stereotypical thoughts? And is it possible for her, being born in the US, being American, to go to Egypt and then be immersed? Or are you always going to be different? And are people always going to recognize that you are a little different? So I think it's very interesting. The book focuses on her relationship with a young man, and also what kind of life does he have? What is the quality of his life? What are his future prospects? The way she looks at her life, the way he looks at his life, the contrast in that, and how their relationship evolves and also becomes very toxic. I thought it was very interesting. And there was a little bit of a cheeky satire moment at the end that I really like. I really think you should read this book if you're interested. So I also read the Infernal Devices books. I read the first book, Clockwork Angel, the second book, Clockwork Prince, and the third book, Clockwork Princess. I really enjoyed the books. They were a little bit of a fun, angsty YA time. Well, actually, they were a little darker than that, but that was the expectation I had when I went into them. I made a video. Watch it if you're interested. I go into length and explain what I thought about the books. Cassandra Clare is a very interesting author to me, because I feel like she knows her niche and she stays in that niche. But honestly, other than the Last Hours books, I don't think I'm gonna ever read anything by her. After that, I read The Fisherman by Langan, and I thought this book had potential, but it was a little bit muddy and it felt unclear, because I understand people that love the whole cosmic horror aspect reading this and thinking, oh, this is amazing, Lovecraft. I just thought I was just not interested. The book starts with a story, and then there is an entire part in the middle that is a story within a story, and then we go back to the story from the beginning, or the characters from the beginning. And I feel like the story in the story was, to me, more interesting. The two stories were not integrated correctly or to my liking. Yeah, I was a little disappointed by this book, but I do understand that other people enjoyed it, and I don't think this is an author I'm going to read anything from. I read Blood in the Water by Tiffany D. Jackson, and it's a middle grade about a young girl trying to solve a mystery and trying to help her father that has been accused of something that she knows he didn't do. And I really love this book. And Tiffany D. Jackson is just an amazing author, and I've never read something by her and was disappointed. Every book that I've read from her was a punch to the gut. And I read it because it's for the Black Queen prompt, the word water in the title. After that, I read Dominion by Addie Citchen, I'm not sure about the last name. This book was basically about misogyny, internal misogyny in the world of the Christian church, and specifically the Black community. It's about a young man, or actually his mom was to me more of the focus, but it's about a young man that is basically causing mayhem and just doing things that you shouldn't do. And when it comes to consent and the way he's moving and the way he thinks that a man should be, and then you start to investigate, what does it mean to be a man? How was he raised? What kind of values did he get from his parents, from the church, from the community? I thought it was very interesting, and I also thought it was very heartbreaking because a lot of the women in this book suffer, and that is what is happening under patriarchy. Women suffer. So I thought it was a very strong book, and it was a really heartbreaking topic. I did something intense to myself. I had Decolonizing the Mind, The Politics of Language in African Culture by Nghi Vo on my TBR for spring, and I read it, and I also added the other book by this author, Decolonizing Language and Other Revolutionary Ideas, because I found that a lot of people spoke about those two books in tandem, and I watched a lot of interviews after reading the book. There were a couple of things that I tried to research to try to understand. I really loved the way his mind works. The way he analyzes language. Why do we use certain words? What is the origin of this word? Why do we still, until today, use colonizer language? And even me speaking English now, that's not a language that is native to me. Especially, I've been looking into, I want to read more translated horror. So I've been really trying to find horror books written by African authors, and it's been really hard to find something that is not written in English. And even if I find something that is not written in English, mostly it's written in Portuguese, written in French, written in another language that is not native to the country. It connected and it resonated with me, especially after reading these books. There is something about how the education system is set up in Africa. The looking to the colonizing countries and languages and seeing that their culture and that their language are as something more elevated. If you studied in the West, the kind of access, the kind of privilege that you get if you go back to Africa to work, it's really heartbreaking. And I really hope we evolve, we better ourselves, and we try to view things in a different way, because that the dynamic is very problematic. It was really hard to read this book. And I think I'm going to order the physical books because I want to annotate and I want to just sit with the books a little bit more, because some of the concepts, this man is very intelligent. So I also read Salutation Road by Salma Ibrahim. And in my TBR, I thought this book was written by a Sudanese author, but this book is written by a Somalian author. I was in shock when I found that out, because it's a speculative book. It tackles a lot of interesting themes, and also it pushes on boundaries of what I think is accepted within the Somalian community and Somalian culture. I love this book, and I really thought the sci-fi speculative elements were really interesting and really fun, because the story is about there's this girl, she gets on a bus, and all of a sudden this bus is not, she lives in London. I think her parents migrated. I'm not sure if she was born there or she grew up there, but she is living between two cultures and she's in England. And all of a sudden she gets on a bus to get to her job, and she finds herself stepping off the bus and being in Mogadishu in an alternate reality. I thought it was very interesting, the whole idea of where does someone belong. A lot of people think the grass is greener. If I didn't make that decision back in the day, then my life would look different. This was a really interesting exploration of that. The main character finds herself in the beginning thinking, oh, maybe this world is maybe better. But then she sees how this world actually looks like, how it would have looked like if she never grew up in the UK, but if she grew up in Somalia, and if the expectations, if her life went down the trajectory that the average woman living in Somalia's life would have gone through. I thought it was very interesting, and I really loved it, and I was very surprised by how the plot progressed. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a chat of the Friday weekly updates Brown Girl Reading. I'll leave her channel in the description. She does those weekly updates and Friday reads where she talks about everything she read or talks about topics that she thinks are interesting. And she recommended this book, Like a Mule Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun by Sarah Ladipo Manyika. In the beginning, I thought, oh, that's a little bit of interesting title. And I try to read from characters that are very diverse. So this book is about a character that is an older woman, and she's very independent. She had like this great, interesting life where she traveled all over the world and done the things that she wanted to do, but then found herself in an apartment, getting old and being a little disconnected. She gets injured, and she has to go into a facility to receive care. And we follow her as she has to deal with the fact that she doesn't have the support system or the social connection that she thinks that she has or that she needs at the moment. There are people that love her, that idolize her, that care about her, but those are not people in her daily life. And people in her daily life are not the people that she's been opening up to and letting in. And so you see her while she's grasping with the fact that she has like this life that she is disconnected from, and the daily life of her going through things while being in this senior care facility. I think this book was so interesting, and I loved a lot of the quotes and a lot of the insights that this character had, and moments and choices that this character made. And to see a character that's a little bit older, that has like this life wisdom or this opinion, and because this main character is very much unapologetically herself. She doesn't make herself smaller. She knows how to fight for herself, and maybe sometimes she oversteps a little bit, but I just admired her, and I loved the way that this author wrote this character. Probably read more from the author. So I resumed. I think now I am in the 6th book in the Singing Hills cycle by Nghi Vo, and the title of this one is A Mouthful of Dust. And I love this one. This one got a little more horrific, and each one is a little bit surprising, but this one pushed it a little further into the area that I enjoy most, which is horror. So yeah, I really loved this one. I was a little bit, I can't really say much, but it's basically a story about this cleric and his companion, and they go around different places listening to people's stories and gathering and archiving everything that they hear and every story that people tell them as a part of a effort by this society they're a part of. And while they do that, they encounter interesting stories, the adventure, a little bit of an interesting situation. That happens, I think, every book, and every book focuses on a different folklore element from the region. I think Nghi Vo is an American Vietnamese author, if I'm correct. So yeah, I love this kind of folklore and this kind of stories being centered, the elements and the writing, and just a fun, short book. I will continue picking up those books. I think the next one is coming out soon, if it's not already out. So after reading Dominion, a lot of people told me that I should read The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filiao. Even though they kind of loosely focus on the same topics, I think I really like this book because this book was specifically centered around a woman, and there was a little bit of a sapphic situation, a little bit of an exploration of identity, of gender, of queerness, how that is in contrast to the expectations of not just the church, but also the community, and also the expectations of being a woman. And I just love this book. This was such a painful book, and the way it ended was a little bit of a rebellious moment, but I really enjoyed it because I love the spirit of bringing forth issues and the problems of patriarchy, especially when that gets intersected with religion and how modern day communities look like. And also the gossiping, the perception. What did this person see? What did they hear? How do they feel? There's something about the way this book was written that I was really impressed with. After that, I read The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hutchinson. And while I understand why this book is hyped and why a lot of people love it, because it did have spirit. It's a book about this young woman that had a hard life. It's a fantasy, and she is being put in this situation where she has to do something that is not what she intended to happen. People have been conspiring against her. People don't like her. People want her to fail, and people are expecting a lot from her. I like the main story. I like the way this story unfolded. I really love the mystery element, even though I already guessed from the beginning 2/3 of the mystery. I think my issue with this book and why it's not rated higher for me, even though I really love the writing, the world outside of this island, outside of this palace, outside of this island, was not vivid enough for me. I couldn't imagine how the bigger world looked like, and I also didn't understand why people were so set on hating this main character and were going above and beyond to hurt her, to attack her, to put her in life-threatening situations. I just felt like the main reason that the author gives us as an explanation of why that is not something realistic. So I think because I had that disconnect, the rest of it fell a little flat. I don't know if I'm going to continue in this series, but I'll just see when the book is published. So after that, I read A Splintering by Aziz Amna, and this is a book written by a Pakistani author, and it takes place in Pakistan, and it's from the point of view of a woman, and we follow her through her young years, her teenage years. She gets married, and how that life looks like, and what kind of choices she makes, what kind of trajectory her life takes her on, and also what her priorities are, kind of life does she want for her children, and what kind of sacrifices is she willing to take. I love this book. It was I think some parts of it are a little controversial, but I really loved the depiction of a woman just wanting to do better for herself and her children, and how the men in her life support or stand in a way. It was a very interesting book, and I'm definitely going to read more from the author. So I also read There's No Anti-Memetics Division by QNTM or Quantum. And I think I heard that this is a not real name, and that the author's true identity was somewhere published. So I didn't look into it. I think his name was Steven something. He used to write in this, I think Reddit, I'm not sure, somewhere, stories. People loved them, and he made it into a longer form novel, and that's what this book is. There is no anti-memetic division. So this book is very interesting because the concept of the book is that there is this anti-memetics division, and this anti-memetics division has people that are trained, that are qualified, that go across the world to help people and destroy memetics. So memetics are concepts, and they're kind of monsters, but there are monsters in the philosophical sense and also in a conceptual and psychological sense. For example, there's this memetic that only haunts you if you know about it. And if you know about it, it knows about you. So there are so many smart and fun and interesting concepts and very creative ways that this author is tackling a lot of different elements, some scientific, some psychological. It's just a very interesting story, and I don't even know how to describe the plot, because it's about this woman, and she's like the head of this organization, and something happens, and then we go on a journey, and then the story is told a little bit out of order, and there are a lot of theories online about certain characters being the same person. If you love an odd, weird sci-fi book, please pick this one up. It's very unique. And also it made me look into the word meme. What is a meme? Because I always thought a meme is just a funny picture with a little bit of a text, but the explanation of what a meme is a little more interesting. So a short description: a meme is an idea, behavior, or style that spreads by means of imitation from person to person within a culture, and often carries a symbolic meaning representing a particular phenomena or theme. For some reason, I just really didn't think that this word meant something so broad, but now I know. And I really like this book, and I think I'm gonna also buy the physical version. After that, I read Son of the Morning by Akwaeke Emezi, and this was such a fun, silly time, because I feel like, on the one hand, I feel like the main character goes through this journey, and her relationship with her parents and with this love interest is very interesting. And there's a lot for me to critique when it comes to family secrets. What does it mean when your parents or the people that raised you make choices for you that affect you negatively? This book from Akwaeke Emezi focuses on the story of this main character, and she is different. She is special. She has always felt different within her family. It's a very fantastical world, and her family has certain powers and certain affinities. She crosses paths with someone that is the son of the morning. Both of them descend into this very lustful relationship, but then in her connection with him, she starts asking questions about her identity, about who she is, and confronts her family. And then there's like this epic moment, and a lot of information comes to light. And I really love this story, but it was not what I expected. I thought it was going to be a little more serious, a little less erotic, but I love Akwaeke Emezi, and I love the writing, and I kept reading it, and I was very entertained, but it was not what I expected. After that, I read At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop, and I think this author is a French Senegalese. I thought it was very interesting that this book is basically a story about a young man that goes on this journey, and he has hopes and dreams, and then ends up on this battlefield, and then we experience his mental descent, him losing contact with reality because he's very traumatized, and it's very intense. And because at that time, I think it's one of the world wars, Black people are being sent to the front lines basically to die. He doesn't die. He keeps coming back, seeing the people that he cares about, people that he bonds with, die or have horrific things happen to them is very traumatizing, very intense, and you see how he deals with it. And also, I thought it was very interesting how the French soldiers saw him as a black person because all of them were white and were treating him and interacting with him versus how the soldiers on the other side were interacting with him, because I feel like he was like by himself. I thought it was very interesting how repetitive it got. And when I looked at reviews, a lot of people said that they got really annoyed with the repetitiveness of certain phrases. But to me, I really saw that more as he's saying those repetitive phrases because he wants to stay grounded, wants to stay connected. And we also get glimpses into his life interweaving with what's happening while he is on the battlefield. I also read Numa Mushi, a fairy tale by Mina Ikimoto Ghosh, and this one was really interesting because it's a folklore, a fantasy story about this river. I'm not sure if it's a river god or entity, and there's this kid and there's this interaction. We see the world through the kid and also how he experiences what's going on around him. And I thought the creativity, the darkness, and also the gory elements were really interesting. I also read Weaving Shaw by Heba El-Wasti, and I really like this book. This book is about a main character, and this main character is in a bad situation because her brother is sick. It's a little bit of a gothic, fantastical story. Her brother is her only living family. She loves him, she cares about him, and she will sacrifice anything to protect him. So he gets sick, and she goes to this entity, offering up whatever this entity wants just for her to get medicine or some kind of cure so her brother doesn't die from this illness. What follows is a very interesting journey where she has to sign a contract. She makes a deal with the devil, and there are consequences because she has this power to see ghosts, and this entity wants to use that power to solve a mystery. So it's a very interesting story. I think it's going to be a trilogy. I'm not sure. This is the first book. The author came to a city near me, so I went and listened to them being interviewed, and I had my book signed, and it was really fun just talking to them and getting my book signed. Was a really positive experience. I also wanted to talk about Pink Slime. I finished it. It's by Fernanda Trias. I think the author is from Uruguay, and I love this book. It was so weird and so odd, and if you understand the connection to the title, it's even more horrific because I think this is a climate horror. The story is about we're in the moment in the middle of a climate apocalypse, and it's not a fast apocalypse where everything is falling apart. It's more a slow, steady deterioration of everything that we know. There's a plague. There's illness, people are leaving the city, but our main character is very much connected to where she is. Her ex-husband is in the hospital and she wants to remain to be able to visit him. So she stays even though everyone else around her is leaving. She ends up having to take care of this young child. This child has a very interesting condition, and she has to make sure he is safe, and she is monitoring him. And while she's doing that, it's so hard to watch her struggle and take care of others while the world is ending. For some reason, it feels like she's going on, not noticing that the world is falling apart. And on the other side, I feel like she's fully aware, but choosing what she's gonna do slowly and just coming to the realization and to the moment that she has to let go of what's familiar to her. I really love this book, and I thought it was very interesting. And I really like this kind of bleak book. So I read Sing Nightingale by Marie-Hélène Poitras. And I think this author is from Quebec. I think the original book is written in French, if I'm not mistaken. And this story was really odd. It's just, I think there are Bluebeard elements interweaving, even though this author was trying to do something a little bit different than that. But it has like this fairy tale element, like this little bit of folklore feel. And it's a story about women rising up and saying no more. We have endured enough, and taking action and trying to stop generations of pain and suffering from continuing on. So I really loved that aspect, but for a really long time, because I read a book last year with a Bluebeard inspiration. So I was dreading for a really long time, is that what this is going to be? But it wasn't. So I was very interested, and I really liked this book. So the last book that I'm going to talk about today, this is the 31st book, and it's The Dollar God Dream Department Store by Mie Lee. And this story was so wholesome, but also sad. It's about this dream department. It's like this space where people that have been educated and trained to create dreams, and sometimes they're just talented and they create dreams. They bring them to this place. The people in this place are specialized and they know who to sell these dreams to and at what moment people come in and buy dreams. And I thought it was very interesting. There's a little bit of a story at the beginning, a little bit of a folklore story. I wonder if it's true, if it's something that exists, or if it's something that was created for this book. And each client comes in and you see what they buy, how their experience was, but not from the perspective from the people, but we followed the story from the perspective from the shop people. So I thought that was very interesting, but I really thought it was very creative and very wholesome, and it had like a little bit of a warm, sad hug feel. As I said, I'm at the moment reading Elder Epoch, so that's what I'm going to focus on and what I'm going to try to finish. What books did you read this spring? What are the books that you rated 4 stars or 5 stars, or books that were memorable to you, or books that you think you can recommend to me? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and bye.